years ago, when I was 19, my family moved into a new house. Although it wasn't too big, we were happy because we finally had our own home. One rainy day, I was walking alone on a dark road back home. It was near midnight, so there were no cars at all. The reason I came home so late was that it was a friend's birthday. On the way home, I felt like something or someone was following me. However, when I turned my head, I didn't see anyone on the road. It's real, I thought, but I quickly felt relieved because I was standing in front of my house. Then, a sudden incident happened. While I was looking for my keys in my wallet, a stranger grabbed my wrist. It was a man who didn't look normal at all. He had a creepy smile, and his eyes were wide, bloodshot, and bulging out. I looked around, but there was no one else on the road. This wasn't strange because it was midnight. I was terrified. I grabbed his wrist back while screaming loudly. He laughed maniacally and let me go. I rushed to the door and pounded on it, shouting, "Help! Help me! Open the door for me!" My father quickly opened the door. I cried and hugged my father, explaining loudly what had just happened. But when I turned my head, no one was there. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. The next morning, I tried to calm myself down by watching TV and saw news about a murder. The victim was a young girl. The police found her body right in front of her door. Furthermore, her wrist had been cut by something sharp, and blood was all over her face. The killer left a note at the scene. She didn't try to fight back, so I killed her. With a smiley face at the bottom of the paper. After watching the news, my heart felt like it was falling out. I was sure it was the man I met yesterday. What if I hadn't resisted? What if I hadn't screamed or called for help? And what would have happened if no one opened the door? The news said the killer was still wanted. I don't want to see that guy in my neighborhood again. Never. When I was about 14, my father and I often had road trips to Nevada to visit my uncle. It was getting darker and darker as we were driving. The car suddenly stopped. This was very strange because we had filled the gas tank for the car just a few minutes ago. My father got out of the car to check what the problem was. While he was trying to find the cause, I suddenly heard footsteps behind my back. I looked back, but there was nothing at all. Actually, because it was too dark, I could not see everything clearly. Maybe I misheard. I thought so. I shrugged and ignored it. Fortunately, at that moment, the car started again. We continued our trip. "Dad sees a gas station ahead. Let's stop there," my father said. I nodded and then put my headphones back on. When we arrived at the gas station, Dad asked me to go down to pay for the gas and, by the way, get some snacks. I took the money and stepped out of the car. However, when I got out, I could feel an unusual silence around. This was quite strange, but I didn't mind much because we were in the middle of the road anyway. I entered the convenience store and went to the snack counters. In the store, there was a man standing behind the checkout counter staring at me. At first, he looked very shocked when he saw me, as if I had interrupted or disturbed him for some reason. And right after that, I realized that his appearance looked truly terrifying. He had an extremely skinny figure with black hair and very short clothes. He did not say, "Hello, customer," like other cashiers, just stared at me with cold, sharp eyes. I picked up a few bags of snacks, put them on the counter, and waited for him to check out. Then he started mocking. "Hey kid, you know what? I am not the cashier." Hearing that, I didn't understand what he said. I glanced behind him, and then I saw bodies lying everywhere. What on earth was happening? I was truly panicking and dared to state for sure that he had recognized my abnormality. At that very moment, he stopped laughing, screamed loudly, and started running toward my father. He chased me as well. The lucky thing was that I was much faster than him. My father saw me, as well as the person chasing me. My father didn't ask what happened, but just quickly locked the car door. He rushed to smash the car and shouted, "Let me in quickly! I will kill you, you damn little brat!" I burst into tears, and my father told me to climb down to the back seat immediately. I also saw him holding a knife. I cried even more intensely. He crazily punched the car door harder and harder. I hid under the back seat and then fainted. When I woke up, I saw police lights everywhere. I stepped out of the car and whispered to my father, asking what happened. But he didn't notice me approaching and continued talking to the police officer. It turned out those men had broken into the gas station and killed the employee right before my father drove there. He had escaped from prison. He had committed many robberies as well as murders in the past. It turned out he was the one who made the footsteps I heard when the car broke down. After that, we decided not to visit my uncle anymore, but returned home. And we also never took such long trips again. Instead, we would always go by plane. A few years later, after finishing my final year of middle school, I found out that man had been killed in prison. I don't know the reason, but I don't feel sorry for him at all. Now I am 25 years old and still thank my father every day for saving my life. But I also wonder what would have happened if I were delayed, or if my father were not present at that time. This incident only happened very recently, and I still can't believe it happened. I live in Sydney, and I am also very familiar with seeing people crazy enough to be scary on the streets or at bus stations. Of course, I know how to deal with such people and always try to escape. A few weeks ago, I decided to go shopping at a large shopping center known as Westfield in Australia. I'm not sure what they call it elsewhere. They are always busy, and it's very hard to find a parking spot, but luckily I found one, at a position where I could easily enter straight into the shopping mall. I shopped and everything was fine. Had a lunch, bought items I liked, and bought one more dress. It was a truly interesting shopping day. I came out of the shopping mall and started walking toward the car. There was no one in the parking lot except a few people trying to find a spot. Nothing was unusual, and then I noticed a woman stepping on the white lines walking toward me. She had thin, messy hair, wearing old clothes, and was mumbling to herself. I didn't care much because people also often do that when they try to remember something or try to recall a thought that just passed through their minds. Suddenly she screamed. Only doing meaningless things. I thought so. I glanced to see if she was suffering or injured, but no, she was not. She was just fine. She just looked straight at my face and screamed loudly. She just looked at me like that. A few seconds passed. Nothing happened. She still screamed and stared at me. Then she started laughing in a savage way. She stopped screaming and rushed toward me. I froze, motionless. In just 3 seconds, I ran fast toward the parking car, threw the shopping bags onto the seat next to me, making all the eggs break, then slammed the door shut. She was both screaming loudly and crazily rushing to smash my car. I started the car and didn't care about that crazy woman falling face down on the ground. However, she was fine. She stood up, grabbed the tail of the car, and tried to break the door once more. I stepped on the gas to continue running, and then I also lost her. My heart beat continuously like it was about to jump out of my chest. I called the police and reported the incident, but they did not find her there anymore. Until now, I haven't heard any other information about that. But my boyfriend suggested I should change to a new license plate.
This story happened when I was on my way to my grandmother's house. That day, I tried to catch a bus, but every bus was packed even at 12 a.m. Finally, I got on one. There were only a few people. The driver, the conductor, 2 girls, a few men, and an old woman. As we passed the psychiatric hospital, a woman wearing a hospital gown stood in the road and signaled for the bus to stop. Her head was bald, and her face was pale. The bus stopped right next to her. Everyone stayed silent. The road was covered in fog and darkness. The bus lights were the only source of light. While I was texting my grandma to say I would be late, I looked at the woman. But before she could step on, the driver suddenly hit the gas and drove away, leaving her behind. I was confused, and so was everyone else. We looked at the driver. He looked terrified, but no one knew why. I asked him why he didn't let her on. He replied with a shaking voice, "That was not a normal woman, miss." He looked in the rearview mirror, said nothing else, and drove faster. Following his eyes, I saw the woman running after the bus in a strange way, at an incredible speed. She ran so fast I couldn't see her face clearly, but I could see her dress covered in blood. I shouted to the driver, "Faster! She's almost here!" Everyone started to scream. I was sitting closest to the door. Suddenly, she jumped onto the side of the bus, grabbed the door, and looked up. It was the most horrifying moment of my life. Her face was bruised with disgusting wounds. Her mouth was wide open with sharp teeth, and her black eyes were staring blankly. My heart almost stopped. People on the bus screamed. I quickly used my bag to hit her, making her fall off. However, as she fell, I saw her stand up, stare at me, and laugh like a maniac. Shortly after, the bus reached the station. Everyone got off quickly. After paying, I went into a 7-Eleven nearby to buy some snacks to calm down. At the counter, the staff asked, "Are you okay?" I replied, "Yes, I'm fine. I just saw a crazy woman on the bus." But what he said next shocked me. "Oh, I know her. She had cancer, so she had to shave her head. She kept laughing like crazy, hurting herself and threatening others. That's why her family sent her to the mental hospital. But the week she escaped, she was hit by a bus and died." I got goosebumps. I asked if he remembered the bus number. For security reasons, he didn't want to say, but eventually, he told me. I thanked him, took my change, and looked back at the bus I had just stepped off. At that moment, I froze in horror. Because that was the exact bus that had hit and killed that woman. Everything happened when I was 13 years old. My parents had a business trip to Los Angeles, so I had to stay home alone. When my dad gave me a bank card so I could order anything I wanted, I was very excited because I was used to this and didn't feel afraid. Besides, my parents' trip only lasted 3 days, which wasn't too long for me. At that time, the news reported about people dressed as clowns breaking into houses and doing strange things. But we thought they would never come to our area because they usually lurked in quiet, deserted places, especially near forests. My house had a low fence that anyone could climb over. But my family didn't really think much about it because our neighborhood was very safe. Back to the story, it was about 6 p.m., and since it was winter, it got dark quickly. My house had a glass sunroom in the back that we called the glass house, which led straight to the garden and was next to the kitchen. I felt hungry, so I went to the fridge to get some snacks and returned to the living room to watch TV. The roof was made of tempered glass, so any sound falling on it, even the smallest raindrop, could be heard clearly. That night, it rained heavily, so I couldn't hear anything except the rain hitting the roof. A few minutes later, I felt sleepy and decided to go upstairs to bed. As I was about to check Facebook on my phone, I suddenly heard a loud noise downstairs. It really panicked me. Despite being scared, I decided to go down the stairs to check, thinking nothing serious was happening. I stepped out of my room, went down the stairs, and looked toward the hallway. The whole area was pitch black, but I knew someone was standing there. I saw a dark shadow and immediately ran back to my room, trying not to make any noise. Right after that, I heard someone walking around the living room. I immediately called the police, whispering that I needed urgent help as soon as possible. Suddenly, I sneezed. Panicked, I ran into the bathroom because it was the only room with a lock. Just as I got inside, the man quickly rushed up the stairs. He pounded on the door and constantly twisted the doorknob. There was a small, frosted glass window on the bathroom door. Although it was blurry, I could clearly see it was a clown with green hair and no nose. He wore strange clothes and held a large knife in his hand. Having no other choice, I quickly opened the large bathroom window and jumped out. I slid off the glass roof and fell onto the cement ground. But I didn't even feel pain because fear had taken over everything. As I was about to jump over the fence, I heard police sirens. They entered my house and caught him shortly after. As he walked past me, I felt terrified and trembling. The police contacted my parents, and they rushed home. When I saw them, I knew I was finally safe. From then on, I never stayed home alone again. The madman in the clown costume that day was sentenced to prison for kidnapping and attempted murder.
This happened when I was in middle school. My school was quite old, and some parts were almost abandoned. There were 3 main restrooms, all kept fairly clean, except for one that was separated from the main building. The floor there was always dirty. It had 6 stalls, but only 3 were usable because the doors of the others were broken. I hated going there. Of course, it wasn't just me. All the girls hated that filthy place. Anyway, one day while I was sitting in class chatting with friends, I suddenly had a sharp stomach ache and needed to use the restroom urgently. That day, the dirty restroom was the closest one to me. Moreover, I didn't want to risk holding it in while running to a further one. So, I went inside, and I must say it smelled like the foulest place I had ever encountered. I went into the last stall because it was cleaner than the others, quickly finished, and tried not to let my pants touch the floor. After that, I went to the sink. The restroom was incredibly quiet then. All I could hear was the water running from the faucet. Suddenly, I heard a knocking sound from somewhere. I turned off the faucet and glanced at the mirror, but I couldn't see anything because the glass was so dirty. So I looked down, continued washing my hands, and started to dry them, until I heard the knocking sound once more. I took some paper towels and slowly wiped the mirror. At this moment, I clearly saw a hand reaching out from one of the stalls and knocking on the door. The fingers were pale and bony. However, when I quickly turned around, the hand disappeared. I couldn't believe what I saw, so I told myself to just wash my hands and ignore it. When I turned back and stood before the mirror, I clearly saw my own reflection. This is the scariest part. I was smiling at myself. I mean, my reflection in the mirror was actually smiling at me, and the smile stretched all the way to its ears. I couldn't move. I just stood there staring at the mirror, frozen in fear. Suddenly, I heard the knocking again. I startled as I looked at the mirror. My reflection was knocking on the glass from the other side to get my attention, while the other hand beckoned me. I screamed in terror, threw the paper towels, and ran out. Back in class, I told my friends, but they didn't believe me. After that day, I never stepped into that horrific restroom again. To this day, I don't want to know what I saw, and I am still haunted by mirrors. I truly will never forget what I witnessed for the rest of my life. I was once followed by some disgusting men and almost got attacked. Before that, I was never really afraid of things like that. I have been through a lot of hardships and considered myself quite strong. Even if a bad person tried to attack me, I wouldn't be afraid because I knew I would fight back. Except when my stomach churns. That is the sign that helps me sense when something bad is about to happen, or to recognize evil people. My friends say I have a sixth sense. I'm not superstitious, but I have to agree this is truly strange. One day, I suddenly had a bad feeling. I was a college freshman then, living in a very nice apartment. On a Friday, I needed to go to the bank before it closed, because I forgot to withdraw money. I left home,
locked the door, and walked toward my car. As soon as I left the hallway, a small van drove slowly toward me and blocked my way. There were two men inside. One was quite muscular, looking like he just got out of prison, while the other was skinny and wore glasses. When I glanced inside again, my stomach began to churn, unlike ever before. I immediately knew something bad was coming. The driver started saying dirty things to me. "You're so beautiful, come talk to us. You're the prettiest girl I've ever seen." At that moment, I didn't want to walk to my car because I didn't want them to know what I drove, nor did I want to walk home because I lived on the first floor, the easiest floor to break into. If I went home, they would find out and keep stalking me. So, I decided to walk to the management office at the front of the complex, which was quite far. I took out my pocket knife and hid it in my sleeve. They kept following behind me as I walked toward the office. I kept an eye on them to see what they wanted. Finally, they asked me to go to a party with them. The muscular man said, "We're having a party at 2 a.m. at a friend's house here. We can hang out and get to know each other first. What do you think?" It was only about 3:30 p.m. then. I ignored them and told them to leave me alone. However, they kept trying to lure me by saying nice things about the party. And finally, both said, "If you come with us, we'll give you a pair of shoes." Saying that, the skinny man leaned back and started fumbling for something behind the seat. I stood a few feet away, ready to run, making sure he wasn't pulling out a gun or duct tape. He took out a dark blue bag and opened it. Inside were about 100 different pairs of shoes. There were all kinds, from pink children's shoes to adult boots and high heels. At that moment, my stomach tightened and my whole body felt weak. I had never felt that uncomfortable before. I screamed, "Never!" They became extremely angry and started getting out of the car. I accelerated and ran as fast as I could. Seeing some kids playing outside, I grabbed them and ran straight into the office. There was no way I was leaving those kids behind with such disgusting men lurking around. Once inside, I told the staff everything. They called the police, and I called the kid's mother. I told her her children were with me, and we wouldn't come out if those men were still there. Luckily, they didn't try to find our addresses then. A few days later, I was too scared to leave the house. I asked a friend to stay with me for a week. On the fourth day, we thought everything was fine and went out to buy food. While I was locking the door, my friend exclaimed, "That van in front looks so dirty." I quickly turned around and realized those two disgusting men were in the van parked right in front of my house. We immediately ran back inside. It seemed they had been watching us for a long time. They hadn't been caught by the police yet, but from that moment on, I never saw them again. Later, I researched serial killers and found that some take victims' belongings as souvenirs. I always wonder, what if all those shoes in that bag belonged to people who had been harmed? Needless to say, I moved away and never lived in that apartment again. Story 1. The Mysterious Fourth Floor. In an old building, one day I went looking for a coffee shop with Wi-Fi because I needed to send some emails. I stopped at a building with a coffee shop sign on the 6th floor. Entering the building door was a dark path leading to a small elevator. I pressed the button to go up. The elevator door opened and I stepped inside. Usually in Asian countries, buildings never have a fourth floor because the number 4 is considered unlucky, as it sounds like the word death. When the elevator stopped and the door opened, I began to realize something was wrong. In front of me was a hallway completely engulfed in darkness. By the light from the elevator, I could see furniture covered in white cloth. Many items here had not been touched by anyone for years. I thought maybe I had gone to the wrong floor, so I looked back at the elevator buttons. But no button for this floor was lit. Suddenly, I noticed something moving at the end of the dark hallway. I didn't know what it was, but it looked like a girl in a white dress walking slowly from the hallway toward the elevator. I was terrified, frantically pressing the close button. Suddenly, the elevator light flickered and went out. Everything was completely dark. I was so scared that I almost peed my pants. Luckily, the girl vanished, the light came back on, the elevator door closed, and it started moving to the 6th floor. I breathed a sigh of relief. The door opened, and this time I was at the internet cafe. I went to the cashier and told the staff about what happened. Hearing my story, her face turned pale. She said some other guests and staff had experienced the exact same thing. She told me about the building's history. Previously, the 4th floor was a hair salon, and business was very prosperous until a woman working there committed suicide inside the shop. No one knew why, but after the incident, the shop continued to operate. However, people there constantly encountered mysterious things that hindered their business. Sometimes, when customers washed their hair, the water suddenly turned red like blood. Others said when looking in the mirror, they saw a ghost standing behind them, but no one was there when they turned around. The mysterious events happened repeatedly, giving the shop a bad reputation and losing customers, so they finally had to close. The owner tried to rent the 4th floor to other businesses, but they all refused upon hearing the story. Finally, the owner lowered the price to almost free, and it was rented by a businessman as a stationary warehouse. However, when they tried to renovate the floor, a series of mysterious accidents occurred. Tools vanished and were found in strange places. A large mirror shattered although no one touched it. A worker's hand was crushed due to a sudden elevator malfunction. The workers were so scared that they refused to continue. The owner also gave up on renting the 4th floor and locked it. He had all the elevator buttons replaced and programmed so no one could go to the 4th floor. That is the whole story of this place. Yet, for some reason, when people use the elevator, it often stops at the 4th floor, and when the door opens, they see that dead woman waiting in the darkness. Taking the wrong bus and almost getting killed. This story didn't happen to me, but a friend from my church experienced it, and he wanted to share this horrifying experience. At that time, he was 32 years old. I'll call him Matt. He was a well-built man, and the event happened on his way home from work. Matt said he had lost his phone a week before, so he couldn't call anyone for help throughout the story. It was past 11 p.m. after work, and he walked to the taxi stand. There, a few people were also waiting. After about 2 minutes, he saw a passenger van coming. Usually those are cheaper than taxis. Plus, he was tired after a long day, so he decided to take it. When he sat down, he saw a boy sitting next to the driver collecting fares. Later, 2 other boys got on and sat in front of him. After 5 minutes of driving, the fare boy asked, "Do you guys want some Coke?" The boys in front agreed and started drinking. They gave some to Matt, and since he was thirsty, he took a sip. Soon after, he started feeling sleepy. He leaned his head against the seat and noticed the 2 boys in front had fallen asleep. As he drifted off, he heard noise from the back seat. 2 strangers talking in 2 languages. With a bit of consciousness left, he saw the car pass a sign for a chicken farm, and finally, he passed out. When he woke up, Matt found himself in a large warehouse that looked like a barn with tools on a big table. He was on the floor, and the 2 boys were beside him. Although Matt felt very sleepy and dizzy, he forced himself up and found a door. He saw the two boys were still unconscious and tried to wake them, but they didn't move. Remember, Matt is a strong man. He tried to see if he could carry one of them, but it was impossible because the sleeping pills were too strong, making it hard even to stand straight. Then he heard voices from outside. Peeking through the door, he saw 3 men from a house on the hill walking toward the warehouse. Matt panicked and tried to find an escape. He looked around and luckily found an exit at the back. He crept out and escaped as fast as possible. His vision was blurry, but luckily he found a fence gate that wasn't locked. He heard someone shouting, but Matt just kept running. Finally, he got home around 5 a.m. His wife had stayed up all night waiting and ran to the door as he collapsed. He slept almost all day. When he woke up, Matt explained everything to his wife. He remembered the 2 boys were still there. He immediately called the police and told them everything he saw, like the road signs and the big chicken farm. About 2 weeks later, the police news reported they found the bodies of 2 young men in a lake. Furthermore, the autopsy showed all their internal organs were gone. At that moment, Matt was terrified because it was so horrible. He had to quit work for a while to recover his mental health. A horrible experience while delivering for Amazon. My name is Nikki, and I am 19 years old. Last December, I got a job for the Christmas season sorting and delivering packages for Amazon. I was always busy because it was the holiday season. I hated a man I worked with named Frank. He was quite fat, had a scruffy beard, and hair I couldn't stand. He was extremely rude and always grumpy. We had to deliver together in a truck, and I was very uncomfortable being with him. I tried to start a conversation, but he was so rude that I failed after 2 attempts. Honestly, I thought about quitting or at least working with another driver, but I didn't want to cause any trouble. After all, this was just a temporary job. At that time, I only thought Frank was a difficult, rude man with no social skills, but I never thought he would hurt me. One night, after finishing all the orders, we drove back to the Amazon warehouse. At least, that's where I thought we were going. However, he drove straight past the turn to the warehouse. But as I said, we didn't really talk, so I didn't dare to ask because he would yell at me. After driving for a while, it was clear he was taking me somewhere else. Finally, I asked him where we were going. Surprisingly, he didn't yell. He just said we needed to go somewhere for a small errand. I looked around and felt nervous seeing empty fields and abandoned farms. It was getting dark. Frank finally parked at a tall cornfield. He told me firmly to stay put and wait for him. Then he got out of the truck, walked into a trail, and disappeared into the dark. 10 minutes passed. I sat alone in the truck and was quite scared because I didn't know where I was. I had left my phone in a locker at the warehouse because we weren't allowed to use phones at work, so I had no phone or flashlight. I needed to use the restroom and couldn't wait anymore. So I got out and went into the cornfield. After I finished, I walked back to the truck, but as I got closer, I saw a flashlight. I thought this was strange because the whole area seemed abandoned. Getting closer, I heard Frank arguing with another man. It was too dark to see the other man's face, but he asked, "Where is she?" Frank replied awkwardly. I told her to stay in the truck. She must be around here somewhere. The other man pointed at Frank and threatened, "If you don't find her, you're dead." The man shone his light across the cornfield to find me. I quickly hid and sneaked away as quietly as possible. While escaping, I cried and thought I was going to die. After walking a long way, I finally left that area and kept running along the trail. I don't know how long I walked, but eventually I found a diner open at night. Thank God, I told the owner everything and he called the police for me. After the incident, I quit the job, but it wasn't over. About 2 weeks after I quit, I got a call from the manager who hired me. He said since then, no one had seen Frank at work. He had disappeared. There were rumors that he owed a lot of money from gambling, an amount so large I can't imagine. I am sure he wanted to pay his debt by selling me to human traffickers, and I really don't want to imagine what those people would have done to me.